Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Emmet Emery Sr. You Better Stand Your Watch Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm doing a little bit different today. It's not a one-person interview or even a Zoom. I decided to have two guests here today with extensive background in the topic that we're going to be covering today. We're going to treat it more like a round table. However, we're going to be talking more personal than academia about the topic. So sit back, put your seatbelt on, enjoy this as I have my brothers, LBs, from Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, introduce themselves to you. Introduce yourself to my audience, Antonio.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Antonio Love. I am a proud son to my parents, Charlie and Cassandra Love. They've been married for almost 49 years.
Wow.
Proud husband to my beautiful wife. Her name is Melissa. And between us, we are the proud parents of 6 children.
Wow.
Ranging in ages from 24 to 10. I am a retired Air Force veteran where I served almost 22 years as a medical service corps officer, and I currently work in healthcare administration. I work in a medical specialty clinic. I run a medical specialty clinic specializing in primary and some specialty care for Medicare Advantage patients.
Okay.
Pleasure being here today.
Thank you. Next is Michael.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Tunstall. I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia. After a small 8-year stint in the United States Air Force, I got into law enforcement with the Richmond Police Department. Upon my retirement from law enforcement, I taught physical education for 3 years. I'm now currently married to my wife, Cheryl, coming up on 7 years. Together we have 5 kids and 10 grandkids, all in the Richmond, Virginia area. I'm currently employed with Formulated Solutions as a technical writer for a pharmaceutical company, and we've been here in Tampa coming up on 4 years now.
Good. Now let's get into this, since you have had that introduction. We're going to talk about fatherhood, and we're going to end it with mentor. And we're going to try not to, it's difficult when you have 3 established African-American men talking about fatherhood, not connecting it to our culture. So we're going to talk about fatherhood, but majority of the conversation might be geared towards our culture. Nearly 20 million kids in the United States are growing up without a relationship with their fathers, which is strongly correlated to these kids experiencing a range of lifelong adversities, from poverty to school performance to social and emotional problems. Oftentimes, when we discuss fatherhood, we assume that the African-American man are not part of the conversation, largely because a number of studies have repeatedly told us that Black fathers are overwhelmingly absent from their children's lives. What is each one of your guys' viewpoint, starting with you, Antonio, on that particular statement about the father, the research in the African-American father being absent from their children's lives?
Wow. Thank you for that question. I'll start by saying this. Research data is deep, far, and wide, and you can find information and data points to pretty much support any type of position that you that you have. So I'll start there. My personal experience has been, the personal experiences that I've had, with my own father and father figures in my own life, ranging from, my dad, my uncles, coaches, and that sort of thing. I've had a very present father, presence in my life.
So were you born inner city, or were you born in a rural area, or were you born in the country? Or you raised in a country area?
I was born in rural America, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story. My mother was a teenage mother. She actually had me at the age of 16, and part of my story starts there. And I've talked about this from time to time. But my dad, at that point in time, he was in the military, Air Force man as well. Wanted to do the honorable thing, right? He said, "Hey, well, let's get married." My mom said, "No, I don't want you to get married because I'm having your child. I want you to get married. I want you to marry me because you want to marry me." My dad.
Your mother was talking this way at age 16?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. She's a strong woman. And very wise, even at that point in time. So my dad, got an assignment and moved to Turkey, mailed an engagement ring, and a year later they were actually married. They moved to, he went to the Philippines and came back a year later. They were married. I was there as a 1-year-old. And then we began our life together as a family. And, from that rural Alabama town, took us across the world to Turkey. And so that was my first experience with a father who pursued not only me and fought to be in my life, but pursued my mother as well. So that's my perspective. My perspective is very unique. Understanding the data points in the narrative around fatherhoods, especially Black fathers, you could certainly understand how different conclusions can be derived. And I'm sure we'll unpack that as the conversation goes. But my personal experience began with the father who pursued my mother and a father who pursued me and to be in my life.
What about you, Mike?
Wonderful story. I was listening to what Antonio was saying and how my life would have been so much different had I had a father figure. Growing up in the inner city of Richmond, Virginia, which is by far not a large metropolitan like New York or Miami, but at the same time, it is a population. The inner city of Richmond is about 250,000, so it could be perceived as a fairly large city, but in contrast to others, it's not. I didn't grow up with my father. I grew up with a stepfather who was one out of 22 siblings. So I had uncles that was present in my life. I had their grandfather or my step-grandfather that was active in my life. So I still had people, father figures that I looked up to, that gave me that structure that I really needed being in the inner city. I can see some similarities, but at the same time, he talked about his father being in the Air Force. I was Air Force like Antonio. I didn't meet my biological father till I was 18 years of age. And he died about 10 years ago, but the impact that man had on me could not have been any better. He wasn't told that he had me as a son. So he didn't know. And when I asked my mom, why did you wait till I turned 18 to tell me? Her response was, I knew you would have wanted to have met him. I knew he would have wanted to have met you. And I didn't feel comfortable with sending me down to Florida to visit my biological father with a wife who was not receptive to this child out of wedlock. So she did that to protect me because I would wanted to have met my father. And being the man that he was, he would have wanted to meet me. So for that reason, she chose not to introduce us till I was an adult. So now I was able to make my own decisions. I met him immediately. We bonded. Throughout my travels, I submitted a request through the military to assign me somewhere close to Florida so I can be in close proximity to. Now, the closest I got was Valdosta, Georgia, which was still an 8-hour drive over to the Pensacola area, but every chance we got, we connected.
How did your stepfather accept that?
Well, I was 18. It wasn't one of those things where we needed your permission. My mother did what she felt that it was time to do. There's a lot of fathers who don't even know they have children. So when you talk about these absentee fathers, there's a lot of fathers who do not realistically know that they have children out there.
Well, I think that statement is a geographical statement.
Okay.
Because my situation was different than the two of you. I was raised in the city of Chicago. in a low-income area they call projects. And you had over 300 families in that project area. Out of 300 families, you probably only had 4 families that had a father in it. So my mother was dad and mom for 9 kids, and she's working 3 jobs to try to maintain. I didn't even see my mom. Out of the first 10 years of my life, I probably saw my mom 4 times. My brothers and sisters supposed to have been taking care of me, the older ones, but they didn't. They was out doing their own thing. So I'm taking care of the other 2, young 2 underneath me. So I never saw or had a father, which is tough, being in that sort of environment, which hurt me later on in life. Without that mentor, that father figure, who is there to show you how to be a man? Who is there to mentor you on how to be a man? Especially coming from the city of Chicago. And my whole objective, I was the 7th child. And being the 7th child, and it was 9 of us, meaning that it was 2 sisters and 3 sisters, 3 brothers ahead of me. And they never interacted with me. My mother never told me I love you until my senior year of high school. But I wasn't looking for her to give me that. Why? Because the culture and environment I was in, that's the way we perceived things. The kids did. If you run around and play. We didn't look for the word love to be told to us. So I didn't really know what that felt like until my senior year of high school going to college. Now I left the public school in Chicago, and they didn't worry too much about academics. They pushed you through high school. For 18 years, that grade school used the same books, material. Had tape on it, pages missing, and we all used the same books. I went to junior college in Alder, Kansas. I came from a small project poverty area of minorities only, no Caucasians. And I went to Kansas. No blacks.
Culture shock.
Yes. Talking about culture shock. Oh my God. So there, in my background, is upbringing, there was the absent father. What I gather from you is there was a father, not biological, and there was uncles.
Yes.
And what I got from you is there was a father.
Yes.
So, and come from that perspective, 3 different perspectives, we can hit a lot of different people.
Yes.
Indeed.
And put them on the straight and narrow. We got a lot of young African-American brothers that's lost. And statistics shows that 2% of the ones that lost had fathers in the household. So we can hit them from many different areas. Well, about more than 19 million children, about 1 in 4 were living in households where no father, biological or other, was present, according to a Census Bureau report in 2005. The statistics also show that this burden falls more heavily on black children. Some 56% of black children live in a single-parent family in 2004, with most of these families headed by mothers. That figure compared to 22% of white children and 31% of Hispanic. Although black fathers are more likely to live in separate households, Pew estimates that 67% of black dads who don't live with their children see them at least once a week, compared to 59% of white dads and just 30% of Hispanic dads. So you dog the black man and don't include him in statistical data, says he's an absent father. Then more research is done saying that he doesn't really live in a household, but he sees his child. Why is that, Antonio?
That's a very very good question. You know, research is done, data is published for a lot of different reasons. To generate and put us on a path and a different narrative, to validate thoughts and things that we want to believe is true. If you want to believe that, hey, black men are absent from families, then you study and you put words together in such a way that drives you to that to that conclusion.
But wouldn't you think that one of the reasons why, as we see, is being false data, is because the African American man, number one, is not being asked that question, or number two, the research is not done in the area.
Of course.
Combination of the two.
Absolutely.
Combination of the two.
Or more.
Yeah.
Why'd you say that?
More. Yeah.
During my tenure in law enforcement, I got to really interact with a lot of African American fathers who I saw at playgrounds. Maybe I'm assuming that they were the kids' fathers, But I also coached Pop Warner football. I saw who was dropping these kids off. I saw who was picking them up, okay? I saw who was coming to the game. So I got to see it differently. After my career in law enforcement, I started teaching in the suburb. And I started also watching the single family parents or the single mothers that was dropping and picking up kids and coming to school.
But why the suburbs, not inner city?
Because I had kids that attended that school district. And actually, my daughter actually was one of my students for 2 years. So it was kind of nice to be able to watch their development. And also I could see her peers and make sure that my daughter or my kids were in the same Chesterfield County School District. So I was not just giving back. I figured I had given back to the city of Richmond. Let me find another entity to also support. So I decided to choose Chesterfield County. I lived in the county area, and again, my kids went there. So, and I got to see a big contrast. I mean, I'm like, gee whiz, there's just as many single families out here in the county, but you don't hear people talk about that. It is usually driven or attached to the inner city, families.
Yeah, there's a narrative, and
Yes.
In order to keep that narrative alive, you have to generate things that will keep that narrative alive. The question is why?
But couldn't it be lack of information? Because the data that I see, it's really all data to the local environment. I've yet to see any data from military. You have single fathers in military.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you have an interesting story. You care to share that interesting story that you have? Because you was a single father for
Absolutely. For a while. I mean, I shared earlier today that me and my wife, we have 6 kids, 6 children. And I say, and I use children, but we're a blended family. And I don't say step this or step that or anything like that. They are my children and that sort of thing. So, I have 2 children, twin girls. They're 19, almost 20 years old now from, a previous marriage. And, when that relationship, that marriage ended, I pursued and, won full custody of my girls. And being a full-time military, at the time I was a lieutenant colonel and, had expectations for command and deployments and that sort of thing. And so, that was very, very real. And I found myself as a single father with a single black father with 2 little girls in the military.
In the Air Force.
In the Air Force. That is more prevalent now. You're starting to see more and more, single fathers. But I will tell you, there weren't a whole lot of single fathers, in the military. And
because they're frowned down upon.
Absolutely. Frowned down upon. And, there was a very real bias in the court system as you're going through that process to really say, hey, I want to be part of my kid's life.
Because the courts automatically give it to the mother.
Absolutely.
Actually, Florida's still doing it. We ain't going to talk about that, though.
Yes. But that bias was real, and it was definitely a process that I went through. You in order to do that, because the narrative is, hey, you're a black man, you're in the military, you're a black man, period. Okay, the narrative, hey, you don't want to be a part of your kid's life. And so you go in there with that perspective in meeting with the court system, and you're telling yourself, you're trying not to tell yourself all that, but those things are, and I remember having a conversation with my lawyer, what about this, what about that? So don't worry about, this is what we're going to do. This is what I need you to do. Do you want to be in your kid's life? Yes, I wanted to be in my kid's life. Do you believe, that, hey, this is in the best interest of your children? Absolutely. I believe this is in the best interest. Well, here's what we're going to do. But, back to your point about, we don't hear about it in the military. The military has its own ecosystem.
Oh, yes,
it really, really does.
Yes.
But
and it doesn't matter what branch of service it is.
It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't. I can say that that's become more and more prevalent and more of a challenge. And I see it honestly, I mean, I know this is about fatherhood, but I see more single mothers in the military and having to balance that. I do see a lot more blended families. I retired about a little over 2.5 years ago, and that's something that is definitely at the radar.
Well, that was active, and when I was active, I separated in 2001. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of blended families.
Yes.
And there was a lot of single mothers.
Yes.
Because a lot of the blacks that was in the military was raised without a father. We're going to get into that a little bit later.
Yep.
So it still had the stigma.
Right.
I don't know if you saw it when you was active or not.
Yes, I did. But at the same time, I didn't see it, I guess, on the larger scale that it has become now. My enlistment was in 1980. So a lot of things have changed from 1980 to where Antonio was.
I know, I was 87 to 2001. I know a lot of things changed
right.
now.
So he's talking, separation 2 years ago, and I'm talking separation before Antonio was born. So I didn't get to see that a lot.
Did you just say before my brother was born?
So young. Oh no, he's young. Is what I mean. No, I'm so old.
I got knees and backs. And I don't know.
Pew estimated that black fathers are more than twice as likely as white fathers to live apart from their children. 44% versus 21%. While Hispanic fathers fall in the middle, 35%. The same research survey also finds that 69% say having a father in the home is essential to a child's happiness. Only a slightly higher share, 74%, say the same about having a mother in the home. Back when I was raised, that gap would have been more huge. It didn't close. 69% says more benefits to have a father in the house versus 74% for a woman. That black woman didn't want that black man around. If you're not going to take care of these kids, you're not going to do nothing in this house, I don't need you here. I'm not going to take care of another child. That's what you heard back then. So it was the norm that a household could have 7 kids and different fathers.
Yes.
My mother had 9 kids. And out of the 9 kids, 5 of us had different fathers. And none of the father was around. So not only was it impact upon me, it was impact upon the other kids too. They're seeing things differently, perceiving things differently in their city. It's different from where you guys came. The family's more stable. So as I advanced later in life, I used to frown down upon an individual who had a 2-parent household but was doing silly things.
Yes.
When I think about it now, at my age, I'm thinking that they're human just like anybody else.
Absolutely.
So they could be going through things differently in their environment versus me and my environment. And that's their way of responding to it. Maybe that's who they are, instead of us frowning down upon it. The United States Census Bureau 2019 report classified 2 types of fatherhood. The solo dads, who appear to raise their children by themselves, which Antonio has specified that he was doing in a few years, and absent dad, who appear to have little or nothing to do with their parents, what we have been talking about for a while. The report did not explain by race. It is a total number of all men. My question to you, starting with you, Mike, explain to me, why do a man have a different love for his son than he does for his daughter? An African-American man.
Wow. Great question. It's something about that little girl that we tend to believe that needs and deserve the protection of a father.
Yes.
More so than a man.
Yes.
I say that because many years ago, I had my second police-related shooting. And when the inspector came, I was yelling at the inspector. I had just been involved in a shooting. My emotions and everything was so high, it could not be measured. And my only statement to the inspector was repeatedly, they tried to take my daughter's father from her. I kept yelling it, and yelling it. The inspector at the time was also my trainer in the police academy years before. So he knew that my wife and I had sons. And I kept saying, they tried to take my daughter's father. They tried the SOBs and everything else that I could think of being involved in a shooting at 2 o'clock in the morning. He looked at me and said, Mike, don't you have sons too? I had zoned out and totally forgotten that my wife and I had sons.
Wow.
I was only concerned about my daughter.
That protective nature.
Yes.
Well, are we raised like that? to make sure that we are protectors of our sisters, of our mom, and then we protect our sisters. Aren't we raised that way in our communities to make sure we take care of the female?
We should be, but we aren't always taught that.
I agree.
That's why the pimps slap them around. That's why the males go out and cheat on them and treat them the way they do, call them everything but what they are. They call them the B's, calling them the H's and everything else, the W's, the Y's.
And where they get that from?
Upbringing.
Because they see it in the household.
Upbringing.
Yeah, it goes further than that.
Yes.
I mean, it goes back to history. There's a historical precedent. You know, a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but you know, all the way back. I mean, you know, the systemic nature in which black manhood was basically demoralized and stripped away.
Yes.
It's real.
But I agree and disagree with that.
Okay.
Did that happen in your household?
No, it didn't happen in my
Okay.
household.
Did that happen in your household?
Somewhat.
So it doesn't happen in everyone's household. So I understand that. But it's such thing as generational curse.
Yes.
So you have generations that break their curse. You were in a loving environment to be raised.
Yes.
Even
but-
though the history of data might have said back in slavery, there's things like this happened, or back in the 20s, this happened, and back in the 30s, this was happening, back in the 40s. But we can't use that as a tool or as an excuse on continuing on
we can't.
with yesterday.
We can't. But you have to acknowledge what is in order to do something about it. And that's, you know, if we fast forward and skip over that too often, then it never really gets dealt with. Mike was talking earlier about, you know, the environment in which I was raised was very different from the environment that my father was raised. So my father was one of 12. He was the second oldest son, third oldest overall. The first 4 children were Loves. The last 8 children were Strouds.
Oh, Love is his last name.
Absolutely.
He's saying it was love. He's saying love.
Right. So, you know, my father did not meet his biological father until he was an adult. Did not meet. Not because my grandfather, his name was Anderson Love, did not desire. It was because his stepfather would not allow it. Literally ran my grandfather off the premises with a shotgun. Okay. So would not allow it. And my father didn't know that. And, you know, he was treated very differently from his other, you know, siblings. He was treated very, very differently. And he harbored some real emotions to that.
But what about you?
What about me?
Do you have sons?
I do not have biological sons.
So you don't understand what we mean by a love for a son versus a father love for a son versus a father. But you can tell us a love for a daughter.
Absolutely. So, you know, I've really thought about that, and I think it's different. I think it's different.
It's different for various reasons.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's different for various reasons, and I can expound on that. I'm reminded of a song, though, and the song is by John Mayer. And he talks about fathers be good to your daughters. There's a part in there. Fathers be good to your daughters because daughters will love like you do. Mothers be good to your daughters because daughters will grow up to be mothers or something like that. And it's really, really, me and my wife, we have this you know, we often have this debate. Not even a debate, it's just a discussion. And I've heard it and I've seen it even in my own house. Mothers will love their sons and raise their daughters.
Yes.
So mothers will love their sons and raise their daughters.
Yes.
And how does that have an impact on the father that's there, that's seeing that? It's very, very different. I've got 4 daughters and 2 sons, right? 4 daughters and 2 sons, and there is a difference in approach. There's a difference in I think the way that we approach parenting daughters to sons, and I think that's the way it should be. Mothers, and I tell my wife all the time, and she's like, yeah, I am going to love my boy and that sort of thing, and I want her to, but there are things that only I can see that you can't see.
Correct.
And these are the things that
It takes a man to raise a father.
absolutely,
And it takes a woman to raise a woman.
absolutely, absolutely.
My situation was different because I didn't have that father and I wasn't shown how to be a man or a father. I loved all my kids the same. My daughters came first. Actually, my oldest daughter is not my biological, but she was 3 when I married my first wife. And I loved her and still love her as if she's my own. And then my biological daughter came along, and that love was balanced the same. My son was born. The love for my son is different, not because he's my son, but because of the situation that happened at birth. My son died twice in his life. After he was born, I cut the umbilical cord. The machine, they took him over to clean him up, and I heard him saying, he's not breathing, it's blockage, not breathing. And then I looked over, and the machine had a straight line. And 3 minutes later, it started coming back. They kept saying, we're getting close, got to get it out, got to clear it. They finally cleared his airways. He was blue at that time. I loved him because he survived. Why did he survive? Because the Lord's hand was on him. I love him because God gave him life. That's what me and my wife had similarities. And I love her to death. Yeah, that's right. I can be emotional passion.
You the hug man.
By the time I'm finished this story, I might need one.
Right.
My wife's son was 2.5 pounds when he was born. That itself, that he survived that, means that not only was it a miracle, but God's hand was on him. That means that if God allowed you to be back from that there's a purpose in your life. And at some point in time, he's going to end up walking in that purpose. Probably don't know it yet. The second time my son died, he was 16. He was celebrating his 16th birthday with his friends, drinking. I was at work, I went around. When they called me, he was already at the hospital. When I got there, I saw my son hooked up to this machine, and he wasn't active. They said it was alcohol poisoning, and he might be brain dead. So I proceeded out to the car. I should have brought in the first time with me, I didn't. I got my Bible. I went back into the room. I sat down. A few seconds after I sat down, it went flatline. So they rushed in to bring him back. They did the resuscitation, all that. I never forget this. My son was pronounced dead at 10:30 that day. I'd already called his mother, who was divorced at the time, and she was on her way. I didn't call her back and told her that we lost a child. What I did instead, I took that Bible, I went down to my knees. It took me a few minutes for words to come out. I mean, I've never cried the way I cried. I've never felt the way I felt. When people said I felt like my heart dropped, they don't know what they're saying. Because I felt that my heart had dropped. I lost my boy, lost my son. They told me that he was dead. I prayed for 4 or 5 minutes, I'm not sure. Bawling. Then I heard beep, 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 beep. I jumped up. I didn't go get the nurse. I didn't go get the doctor. I jumped up and said, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. There's a purpose for him. And there's a purpose for me. Through my faithfulness for you and to you, you gave my son back." And for 2 years, I preached on Abraham and Isaac when the Lord told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but he didn't take his life. To this day, the love for my son is so strong because my heart dropped. And I knew he was a very important part of my heart. My wife's son, he's 23 now, about 6'3", 200-something pounds, handsome young man, chick magnet. My son, he's 32, 200-something pounds, 6'3". I said, look at God. Both young men were just about taken, and both young men still walking at the purpose. And God put me in the life of both young men. I don't know what my purpose is, but I'm sure he's going to let me know at some point. So I love my son because he died twice in my present. And the Lord used me to bring them back once. And for that reason, I will always love that boy. My wife loved her son to death. She loved her daughter, but it's that certain love that you was talking about, that mother for that son. And that's for any mother. It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, Hispanic. It's that mother love for that son. Mm-hmm. But my love for my son is because of that incident. If that incident didn't happen, I don't know if I would have loved him this much. Because I didn't have that love myself from my father. My mother didn't hug me and say, I love you till I was 17. So I didn't have that. So to go through that experience, what that did will pull me closer to my kids.
I think that that's a beautiful story.
Yes, indeed.
Beautiful story. And you know, we're talking about fatherhood. And I think, you know, ultimately where this leads back is really back to the Father.
Yes. Yes.
And God is a God of order. And he really showed what fatherhood looks like. You talked about sacrifice, and you know he showed that. And you know when he stepped out of heaven and put on the clothes of man and stepped into this world as Jesus, as his son, and his son gave the ultimate sacrifice. But you know, fatherhood and this whole topic of fatherhood, and I think you so eloquently, you know, really took it back to where it begins and where it started to unravel.
Yes.
And you know, God is a God of order. God is a God who created man and created woman for man and said, you know, leave and cleave and be joined one to another. He's also the one who said to submit and to surrender. And that's what you did when you went to your knees. Mm-hmm. That's what you did when you went to your knees. I know we weren't, you know, on that topic, but I think it's so clear in my mind. And I think it would be robbery if we did not talk about the Father when we're talking about fatherhood.
Well, I was going to get into that. I'm glad you went
ultimate
on
father.
into that,
There you
because
go.
I
The
also
ultimate
deal with
father.
spirituality too.
Yes.
And if you look at through your biblical teaching, you'll see through the Old Testament how the Lord used the Father and the Son. And then it be brought to fruition with his relation with his Son when he died for our sins. So it always have been a figure for the Father and the Son. You even go back to the Egyptian days or back in Africa days and see how they treated the son. The son was treated a lot better than the daughter.
Definitely.
So not only is it biblical teaching, but it goes back to historicalness, like you said. Mm-hmm. But at some time, it was flipped, whereas the father wasn't looked at like that again in the United States, like overseas. And if you're from the military, we know that because we saw the reactions from father and son in different countries. That's why I love Tupac. He talked about how the man used to respect that mother.
Yes.
How mother didn't bear you, and now you disrespecting women. How can you disrespect another woman when you only want to disrespect your mother?
Yeah.
But the systematic tear down of the black male was purposeful. You know, when you look back at the history, they purposely attacked the black man. So, you know, if you don't respect yourself, it's hard to respect anybody else.
And you're right, because statistics shows that 79% of white male is into domestic violence, 23% of black male. So the black male not beating up their wives or beating up their girlfriends. What did you see doing homicide? What was the statistics like when using homicide?
The majority of the crimes committed in inner cities were actually committed by African-American males, but the big percentage of them was actually on other males. It wasn't more the domestics when it comes to the
not male to male. I'm talking about male to female. What your statistics show?
It was extremely high. I don't think that there was actually data like what you got right here now. Mm-hmm. It was there, but I guess it may not have been so readily available for people to research. I mean, then again, it was just the infancy of the World Wide Web, so we really didn't have that data in your palm of your hands, to say. You know, you had to actually encyclopedia
the Britannica in the World Books.
Now you're showing your age.
You had to go back with, let me go to the book. Yes.
The card catalogs at the library.
Well, you had an alphabetical order, so it wasn't hard to find.
But yeah, a lot of the data that we got now, like what you are looking at, was far in between. But I guess the areas that I worked in Richmond were the predominantly black areas. I mean, I didn't spend actually that long in patrol. I was fast-tracked throughout other departments, extremely fast-tracked. I tell people I hit the streets January the 5th, and before Thanksgiving, I was already being pulled over into specialized drugs and firearm units. So yeah, it was fast-tracked. I guess my first day in patrol, I will never forget it. My very first call was a stabbing, and I remember the dispatcher saying, "Welcome to police work." My very first call. But by the end of my shift, this young lady had died. And because I was from that project area, I knew the family.
Wow.
So when I'm talking to the kids, they were like, "Well, Mike, you remember where my grandmama lived?" "Yeah, over there on such and such street." "Well, that's where my dad went." So the homicide detective, C.T. Woody, is like, "This is your first day, and the people in this project know your name?" "Yes, I'm from this area. I did a lot of playing and whatnot in this area." So we had to go over to Mr., won't say his name, parents' house, and he was there. So I have to now tell him that the wife that you stabbed is now deceased. So CT allowed me to lock this gentleman up. And he basically said, "You have made a felony murder arrest on your first day out of the academy. You won't be in patrol long." Because people can spend a whole career, 20, 30 years, and never actually lock someone up for murder. And here it is, you've been on the street a matter of hours.
And you did it in a neighborhood that you was raised.
I did in a neighborhood that I was extremely familiar with. I mean,
The officer, you can chime in. I think he asked you that question. I could be wrong. That they knew who you were. You can leave neighborhoods and then come back and they don't know who you are. But you must have stayed there and contribute to that society. Whereas the kids knew who you were, not the adults. And that's powerful right there for him to say that. I don't know if you saw it in that perspective or not.
well, it's funny that you said that. A few years later, I left that area and I came back in a different capacity. But there was a school called Carver Annex that was inside of the project area itself. So every now and then I would go over to the school just to say hello to the kids.
Make your presence.
Make my presence known, let the teachers know that, hey, there's a police officer. Every student in that classroom that I walked in stopped and gave me a hug, or I gave them a hug. The reason was the only time African-American males were ever touched was through discipline.
Wow.
I made sure.
Wow.
And every teacher, I explained that to them. I may be in this school for 2 hours, but every student that I come into contact with will be hugged. Wow. Because I also walked the streets of that project. And I remember one day, this kid was on the corner, was on the stoop, crying. Well, what's wrong? I'm hungry and my mama won't feed me.
Explain to my audience, that's raised in Antonio area, what a stoop is.
I know what a stoop is. Come on now. I know the stoop. I know what a stoop is.
He looked at me and said, Mike's a stoop.
Oh, my God.
He said, your question was stupid.
No.
He knows.
Yes.
For those I'm going to say Catholic, those out there, stoop is your foundation or your steps that lead up to your landing and whatnot.
Yes.
So I knock on the door. Is that your son? Yes. Of course, the attitude of a black female in the inner city, policeman knocking on your door, asking us, well, ma'am, you need to feed him. I got some choice words.
Yeah, you're trying to tell her how to do what to do with a child.
Then I gave some choice words. A few years later, there was a PTA meeting, and no volunteers for the the PTA president. I volunteered. There was this big backlash that you can't be president of a PTA if you do not have a custodial child at this school. So at that time, a certain administrator, she wasn't a police officer, stood up and said, I beg to differ. He don't have one child in the school. He has 300 children in this school.
Wow.
And Lucille M. Brown, the superintendent of public schools, signed a proclamation that allowed Patrolman Michael Tunstall to be the president of a PTA in the inner city of Richmond, Virginia, without having a kid in that school.
So that's mentor.
Well, so you asked the question. You asked the question, and I think you phrased it something like this. They knew you.
Yes.
They're going to know you, me, anyway. The question is, how will they know you? Because you could have shown up very, very differently, and you would have been known for, oh, that's Officer Michael Tunstall, you know, and some have that one to, you know, stay out of his way. He's up to no good.
Yeah, but but the kids knew him.
Right, and that's my point.
When I go to the projects,
they're gonna know you
and
anyway.
I come back, they don't know me.
Well, they're gonna know you anyway
because I wasn't there. So the older people knew me because I was there, but the
Okay.
kids not gonna know me because I wasn't there.
Okay,
that's why I was getting it.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making is, you know, any time that you show, you spend, and if you're a police officer and you're patrolling a certain area, you're spending time.
They're gonna know you.
They're gonna know you. The question is how they're gonna know you, and the things that you did. Every kid's gonna get a hug. The things that you did when you said, "I want to volunteer for this," and you didn't have to fight that battle. Somebody fought because they've seen how you show up and they know you.
Right.
And that's and you were going to the mentorship and
right. That way they see if you're a good cop or a bad cop.
Absolutely.
Because you're labeled in those areas.
Absolutely.
The police is not wanted.
Right.
In the area, not accepted in those areas. So you're right.
Yes.
If you stand out like that and you do things that's beneficial to the community, they know you. If you're just there, they know you too. Absolutely. If you're a cop that arrests everybody when you see them because you think they're selling drugs, they know you. Right. So you're right. Your presence makes a difference out there. Expound on mentor. You just said something about mentor.
Yeah, we talk about fatherhood and we talk about, and we know, it's just not in the African American family. I mean, their family has a different meaning. It has a very, very different meaning. The traditional, two-person biological, home is something that is not ever present. Black, white, Hispanic, and that sort of thing. I mean, so we talk about fatherhood and we talk about the ability to have an impact on the lives of children, on the lives of young African American men in particular. And you have opportunities, whether it's a police officer working in a neighborhood, whether it's a coach. I use my brother who passed away from cancer about a little over 2 years ago now. He was the one that stayed home. I joined the military. I traveled the world. He was the one that stayed home. My sister moved to Georgia. I was all over the place. My brother stayed home in Alabama, and he was a teacher. He was a social worker. He founded a nonprofit organization called SOAR Inc. SOAR, SOAR, and it stood for Serving Others, Accepting Responsibility. Serving Others, Accepting Responsibility, and that's what he made just an impact. And the thing that
sounds like he loved people.
He loved people, and he cared, and if I can say, he gave a damn. That's the first criteria, right? Do you give a damn? Yeah. And if I can't use that word, I'm sorry.
Too damn late now.
It's a damn shame.
There we go. So and so we like you said. I mean, we cannot stop at the point. Well, hey, this is what the statistics are saying. This is what your experience was as a black man. do you care to do something about the situation moving forward? And there are a number of really, really great examples that I see each and every day. We just heard this. I look to my brother, men in my life outside of my father that I still to this day count as, a mentor, to this day. And so, mentorship starts with, okay, do I care?
Right.
Do I care first and foremost? You don't have to have a whole bunch of letters behind your name, written books or anything like that. I think as a father, one of the biggest things that I recognize in as a need for my children is, do I care? And am I there? Where I spend my treasure, my talents, and my time, that's where that's where I am.
But you are the immediate mentor in the present, your kids. Yeah. As far as mentoring, community mentor, and service of that nature, do you think mentorship is based on the background in individual towards another individual? Or should you just have someone just mentor people and they have no idea what the background is of the person who's mentoring or they're mentoring?
I can see it both ways.
Expound.
When I was a Cub master, it was because it was by...
You said Cub master?
Oh, yes. I was a Cub master when I was living in Valdosta, Georgia.
You remember
Cub
when you were
master.
6 or 7 years old?
Cub
You Cubs
master.
were 6,
Cub
7,
master,
eh?
yeah.
Yes, I was a Cub master.
I was a Weebelo.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
It also expanded on my fact that I was
I
also...
have no idea what a Weebelo is.
You go from
Young.
Cub Scout.
Yeah.
You go Cub Scouts and then Weebelo and then Boy
Boy
Scouts,
Scouts.
Eagle Scouts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
It was because I had experience as a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout growing up. So I knew when the opening came open, and I was living in Valdosta, Georgia, that these group of young men needed some type of foundation, somebody with some experience. And I guess I was, again, at the right place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time to move into that position because I had experience with being a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout. So because I had experience at that, it helped me out. When I became a youth coach in football, I also had experience with being an athlete in high school who played football. Mm-hmm. And I remember volunteering for the South Richmond Metro Hornets, and we had a young man on there that I was extremely fond of because being a police officer, his father worked security with us. Mm. And I really took to this young man because his father worked security hand in hand with the police department. And I can say that young man is currently in his 4th year playing with the New York Jets.
Wow. And you give yourself credit for that?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
So I don't want to sell you.
But you did play a part in his life, though.
Yeah, absolutely. No?
So why you mention it?
I mention it because it really tied into whether or not I had experienced it doing something.
Okay,
and,
all right. All right.
Because I wouldn't have been able to go coach someone swimming.
Unless you had the experience.
Exactly. So that's how that tied in, because my love for football and playing football and having kids. The experience. But I wouldn't have been able to get out there and teach swimming or lacrosse.
So what did you feel about your opinion on individual mentor versus group mentor?
Yeah, so
group mentor is more the organizations and things of that nature.
I think there's room and space for both. I think there's how many times have you heard, man, there are so many pro athletes behind bars. Yeah. How many times have you heard that?
Yes.
And you go there and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking about a very, very recent just experience that, I was not a part of, but I'm close to, because this person I know personally, and his father was my high school football coach and lifelong mentor. But this is something that I watched over the course of the last 3 years. This young man took over in a football program, Booker T. Washington high school in Tuskegee, Alabama, Booker T. Washington. So, the infamous, famous Tuskegee and that sort of thing is very close to my home. So my dad is actually from Tuskegee. I got family members in Tuskegee and that sort of thing. And you think about Tuskegee, and then if you go to Tuskegee, you have Tuskegee University, and then you have a lot of things that are just not where it needs to be. But the impact of mentorship and leadership and mentorship matters. And I go back to the adage of first you have to care. You have to have a heart for it, because the work is out there, whether it's individual or organizational. This happened to be more organizational. So he went in, he took over a program that was failing. Took over a high school football program that was failing. For years, had never been to the playoffs, never won a playoff game. Very rarely, I think 1 or 2 times, actually had a winning record. Athletes were there. Athletes have always been there. But he came in and he invested in those boys. He invested in them and made them start believing. His mantra: why not us?
Okay.
Wow.
Why not us?
Wow.
And, after 3 years last year, they made it to the playoffs. Last year. This year, they made it to the 4th round of the state playoffs, almost went to the championship game. And it's just a tremendous. So not only, those boys that, and there's a lot of them. I have cousins that grew up in that environment and that sort of thing. I talk about mine, but, my dad's, cousins and that sort of thing. Some of them are those athletes behind bars. And what's missing? Father, mentorship, and filling that void, because it matters, because he got those boys believing in themselves. Why not us?
Why not us?
Why not us?
I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. We had a pretty good time with my LBs communicating with each other. I haven't seen these gentlemen just civilized in one spot for so long a period of time. I'm going to have them say their last words to you before we call it a night. Mike, what you want to say to my audience going out?
First again, thank you for having us here.
You're welcome.
To be able to speak. And to the males out there, please be active in your lives, be active in your kids' lives. And if you have the opportunity to, reach out to someone that is not yours. Each one, reach one, teach one.
Wow. Antonio, my audience?
Yes. First of all, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure. I just simply say it doesn't take much. It takes willingness to invest in someone and to be there for them. It doesn't take much to really inspire, and you never know that seed that you plant, how it's actually going to grow.
Yes.
And you don't have to do it all. Somebody else can come out and do a little bit and that sort of thing. But we're all called to do something, and I just encourage people to look around and see what's out there to be done, and just be willing to do their part.
Well, I thank you guys for tuning in. I'd like to give congratulations real quick to my wife. She received her Escalade, the last car you can get as director for Mary Kay. Congratulations, sweetheart. And to my son, he finished his semester with a 3.5 GPA, and now he has 1 year left. And to my daughter, she finished up her not last year, but this year. She's finishing up now, and next year will be her last year of veterinary school. She'll be a doctor, age 27. Lord help her. In closing, yes, Mike did get the memo. We just didn't come dressed like this. He knew, he just didn't do it. He had to be different. Thank you. Until we meet again, goodbye.